Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Kathleen Kuo, and I'm a program manager with Nevada Humanities. And on behalf of the organization, it's really my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So for those of you who don't know who we are, Nevada Humanities is our state's affiliate for the National Endowment for the Humanities. We try to connect and transform the communities of Nevada by sharing and amplifying the stories, ideas, experiences, and traditions of the diverse people who live here. So this creative workshop series is a part of our Nevada Reads programming. In 2022, we're continuing the theme of cultivating environmental literacy that we began in 2021. And that's when we selected two memoirs that encourage us to celebrate and appreciate the natural world. And in particular, the workshop was inspired by World of Wonders by Amy Nezuko-Matato. It's a really beautiful book. The themes and illustrations were what inspired this workshop series. So if you haven't already read this or own a copy of it, we really hope that you're inspired to do so after the workshop ends. So as we are engaging in conversations about the natural world and the land we inhabit during this year's programming, one of our goals is to have our readers become better stewards of the earth and to learn more about the land that we're living on. So as part of this goal, I wanted to acknowledge where I'm sitting today in Nevada. We're gathering on the traditional land of the Northern Paiute, Southern Paiute, Western Shoshone, and the Washoe people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout generations. So to learn more about the land that you reside on, I'm going to share a link in the chat right now to help you out with this. And now I'm going to introduce our wonderful workshop leader for today. So Kristin Meuser has been planting the land for many years throughout California and Nevada. She currently teaches online Zoom workshops on essential landscape elements, including cacti, mushrooms, flowers, waterfalls, creeks, lakes, rivers, hills, mountains, cliffs, journal page design, and more. She moved to Las Vegas in 2018, where her fascination with the desert landscape has flourished in nearby Red Rock Canyon. Kristin's workshops focus on nurturing a deep connection to nature through the ability to see through skill-building exercises, including color mixing and unique exercises that demystify the art and science of drawing, painting, and writing. So you can find her schedule and further information about her ongoing Zoom workshops at her website, which I will post in the chat right now for you as well. So during this workshop, Kristin will reference a handout. So you should have received this in your email when you signed up. But if you don't have that with you, you can find it on our website here. So you'll just scroll down, you can download this document that she'll be referencing. And during our workshop, you are more than welcome to answer or to ask questions. And Kristin will do her best to answer them after the workshop ends. But if we aren't able to get to them during this time, we will compile the list of questions and we'll send you an email with the responses afterwards. So Kristin, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and thank you again.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's always a pleasure to work with you and Nevada Humanities. You do such a great job here in Las Vegas and throughout Nevada. And welcome to all of you. This is a webinar rather than a Zoom meeting, so I can't really see who's here, but I see that we have about 66 people. So welcome to all of you. I look forward to sharing this workshop on creating depth. It's something that I don't often have time to really explore in depth in my workshops, and I'm really happy to be doing this. For those of you who know me, I always want to present so much material, and so I end up painting really quickly. So what I'm trying to do today is to slow it down quite a bit so that you can paint along with me. We won't be having questions. You can put them in the chat, and Kathleen will be monitoring in case there's something really important. Kathleen, I'm happy if you want to interrupt me and ask that question. Because I do think we'll have time. I've put together a slideshow, and I'll be explaining the ways in which I've used these landscape techniques in some of my paintings. And then after the slideshow, I've chosen two landscapes that I will paint. So I'm not sure if we'll get to the second one, because as I said, I'm going to try and slow it down. But so you'll get an idea of, I'll be referencing the landscape elements on your handout as I paint. And so that'll kind of bring it more home. So I will begin. I'm going to share my slideshow. And here we go. So this is creating depth in your watercolor painting. And I'm going to leave the sidewire open because so that I can hop around. So let me see, I'm also going to close this window. Okay, so creating depth in your watercolor painting. I'm going to go through these journal pages and give you an idea of what I mean. I'll be referencing the techniques and give you an idea of what I'm talking about on that table. So one of the main things that in a landscape that helps us have a sense of depth is that the mountains get bluer in the background. And this is a color temperature. So it's getting cooler in the background. So the color temperature is toward the bottom of your table. The mountains in the background are going to have a bluer cast to them because you're looking through the atmosphere into the distance. And the closer in mountains are going to be warmer. And that is something that our brain recognizes as what is close and what is far. So a lot of what we're looking at here is what our brain really, how our brain parses the landscape, and then how we use those same ideas to recreate paintings in our journals or in the other or on your page. So even here we have trees, and then in the background you can see that the trees get bluer. The whole hill back here is filled with trees. I've indicated that with little graphite marks, but that creates a sense that it's in the background. So the marks are simplified, and that puts it in the background, and also the color. So you've got two things working there. So as we get closer, we have trees that are a little bit warmer, a little more olive, and that brings them forward. And they also have more of a tree detail. And then moving toward the front, we start seeing rocks and grass, and we see a bush here that's even brighter in color and has more specific detail. Here we're looking into the background, and one of the things that's happening here is we have overlapping foliage. So that tells us what's in front and what is in back. And then as we go back in the distance, our mind can tell us that these are similar kinds of foliage as they go back, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as they go back in the distance. So back here, they're just little dots with no detail really at all, just a little bit of color of the sort of more of a drab green color. And then here in the mountains, we're looking at sandstone here, and then back here it's getting bluer, but these mountains in the back are also limestone. So they're two different types of rocks. Down here we have a tree or a bush in the front that has that bush shape to it. Its roots and leaves, branches are very close to the ground, and that's a tip off that it's not a tree, it's a bush. So that information gives you that sense that, okay, we're looking at something in the foreground, and then we work ourselves back into the back. And even a little bit of the sandstone is peeking out back here. more detail in the rock in front, less in the back. Here we have a pretty classic view of these techniques. We have a sort of a violet mountain in the background, and then it gets more. It's a blue green here. It does have trees on it, and then this shape here is trees that are even closer and they have detail. And then here we have the trees that are really close. They're just over the edge of this rocky area. And then we have rocks that are bigger, pretty big, and they have a lot of detail. And one thing to really notice is that they have more, the contrast is more significant in the front, in the foreground. In the background, the difference between soft and between the soft light and the dark light, or the detail, the contrast, it's more subtle in the background and more extreme in the foreground. In this one particularly, we have trees that are tall and big and are really in our face, and that says they're close. And and then we go back and we're looking through those trees at a scene in the distance where the trees are much cooler. They're darker because they're shaded, I believe, probably by one of these clouds. So they kind of fall to the background, and then we see that there's that depth definitely going on. So here again, we have, in this situation, we have trees that I wanted to point out, or bushes. And the bushes follow the slope of the mountains, and they go back in the distance. They have less contrast, they have less detail, and that definitely is a tip off that they're going back. So this could easily just feel like a flat surface, but with those little details, they start to really go back into the distance. Another thing with the water that's going on is that in the distance, the water will tend to be darker. And as you get closer and as it gets shallower, you start to see a combination of what's underneath, perhaps the seaweed, and just it's got less water for the light to travel through. So you get a lighter sense there. And here we have a very simple landscape, but noticeably we have olive green plants in the foreground, and then we can tell that they're just little clumps of bushes in the far background. So the idea was to really create a distance between the foreground and the background, and to do that with scale. And then we also have the cooler mountain in the background. And here we have rocks in the foreground with detail, reflection, and then our trees are pretty warm here. These are oaks, and in the background, they get bluer, and they are more of a blue-green. And then this is a mountain range in the back that is pushing back because it's could be as brown as this, but because it's so far away, we're looking through a whole lot of atmosphere. And we've got a little bit of this going on here. The rocks in the foreground are bushes and trees, are warm in the foreground, and then they start to go cooler in the background. And then we have a nice big bush in front that brings us forward. It's also a really warm color, and so it really sets the stage for this depth that we're looking for. So here we have the landscape technique, and I'll go over it again. So this is the technique on the left, and then this is what it looks like in the foreground and the background. So in terms of detail, there's going to be more detail in the front, less in the back. The line quality can be heavier in the foreground and lighter in the back. Contrast, really, really important, that the contrast in the foreground is going to be more extreme. You're going to see more darks and more lights, whereas in the background, you're going to see softer lights and darks. They're going to be closer together in value, and they're going to feel a little flatter. In terms of size, the foreground tree is going to be larger than the background tree, unless it is actually a smaller tree in the foreground and a larger tree in the background. And the way you handle that is with overlapping. So even if the larger is in the background, it can be overlapped with the smaller, and that'll calm the mind so it understands what's going on. And then temperature and color intensity are similar. The color temperature of the same object in the foreground is going to be warmer, and as you go back into the background, it becomes cooler. And color intensity is more brilliant within the same object in the foreground, and paler and duller in the background. So we're going to be referencing these as I paint and as you paint along. It's not always possible to use all of these, or necessary to use all of these techniques. Sometimes you'll have a cloud over a landscape, and what you're thinking should be actually brighter and lighter is going to be cooler and duller because of the shade of the cloud. So then you want to work with line quality and detail to kind of bring it forward or into the distance. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start with this image, and it's at Mono Lake. And some of you may be very familiar with it. I've got my camera going here, and I am going to share this. Stop this share and start another share. Okay, and get my back and get my camera back. Just one moment. Okay. Okay, so see, I'm going to make one more adjustment here and bring up this. Okay, Kathleen, I'm going to ask you whether you can see my hand and journal in the right and the photo in the left.
Yes, it's coming across. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Okay, so let me let that go, and I'm going to do the slide only. Okay. So when I draw and paint, I always start with a blue pencil. And on my journal here, I'm going to, you don't see the full, I'll bring this forward for now. Now you can see the full page. I'm going to break this page into two images, two rectangles. And I'm drawing a line down the center and a line on either side of that. And then another line of similar weight along the bottom, the side, the top, and then this side also. And then I like to outline the rectangle with a graphite pencil, and that is the area that I'm going to be painting. And I'll do that on both rectangles. So the blue line gives me a kind of a first run, a first attempt at making a nice box. And when I'm drawing and painting, the same thing happens. Kathleen, I hope my voice is coming through well. And then I'm also going to add one more piece down here for additional color mixing. Color mixing is something I pay a lot of attention to, and I believe that it adds a real nice graphic element to your page. Okay, so let me bring this forward. Okay, so what's interesting to me about this image is the foreground. We have nice foreground plants. We have plants going back in the distance. We have water going back in the distance, so it gets more solid in the back. It gets more broken up with the reflection of the sky as it comes forward. What I enjoy about this is also it shows how clouds work as you're looking out into the distance. Clouds when they're close up, so these are closer, they're rounder, they're bigger. In the background, they tend to be smaller and they pile up closer, and they're more of an ellipse. It's kind of like the same thing that happens with railroad ties. If you look into the distance, they get closer together and smaller. So the same thing happens with clouds. So on this, in this painting, drawing and painting, I'll start with my, let's see, let's start on this side. With my blue pencil, and I'm going to just try to fit it into this rectangle. It's slightly different, so I'll probably not put in all of the foreground because the foreground there's quite a bit of green there. So I'm going to figure out where my horizon line is basically, and I'll put it somewhere in here. My blue pencil. And then I want to put in where the top of this tufa is. The tufas are these mineral deposits that are in Mona Lake and around Mona Lake. So I'm going to start popping them in. I also want to figure out what I find with these far away hills, that I often have a tendency to want to make them bigger, but really they are a pretty narrow slice. So I'm going to make that very pretty and small. Then I have clouds here. And then the bottoms of some big clouds up here. And I'm using my blue pencil pretty lightly. And then I'm going to start carving some of these other shapes. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that I hold my pencil way up, about 3 inches up on the barrel of the pencil. And that's so that I can let my pencil actually kind of dance as I figure out these shapes and how they relate to each other. So I am a person who, it takes me a while to find my way into how to draw an object. So having this blue pencil is a godsend, and I think it is for other people as well. So if you haven't experienced it, I really encourage you to get yourself a light blue pencil and help give yourself a chance not to start right off with your graphite, because when you start with the graphite, I for one end up doing a lot more erasing. So I've developed kind of a bush shape. It has this flat bottom and kind of a rounded top. They aren't all the same, but that's my shortcut, or for bushes. And I find the more that I do nature journaling, I find that I do create more and more of these little icons that help me get a kind of a handle on the subject matter. Got some nice shadows here. As I get closer, I use my bushes they have more detail. So I'm going to put detail in these. Probably this one because it's nice and big, but back here, these I think I'll just leave them as really just little fan-shaped objects. Got a rock here. Rocks are nice because you almost always get some nice shadows. So we've got a lot of shading here on the tufa. So I'm going to go ahead and mark where the light is going to be on this, so I don't get it. And painting get carried away. Okay. So my next step is to use my graphite here and start to draw in these shapes. So I'm going to go ahead right away and make sure that I leave this pretty much undrawn, unpainted. And then this other face, I will be actually filling in with some graphite. And I'll do that right now. So I use the graphite to um, give myself a definite dark area, so that when I paint, it really simplifies the painting because I can paint right over it and it becomes dark rather than mixing two colors, which is really helpful. So I'm going to create kind of a puzzle here.
Kristin, you just answered this question a bit, but someone was just wondering if you could repeat the benefits of using the blue pencil as opposed to graphite.
Oh yeah. The reason I use it is because my first pass at drawing with graphite is never accurate, and so I end up erasing a lot. So the blue pencil gives me a chance to put it down, and then I have like a framework to use my for my graphite. And it also gives me a chance to learn about the subject I'm painting. So that works for me. And some people can go just right to it, but I really love having the blue pencil. I learned that from Jack Laws. I find that when I don't do that, my paintings are not nearly as true to the character of what I'm working on. So there's going to be a fair amount of dark in this here. I'm not going to overdo it, but it really will help me with the painting. So, you know, this is an HB pencil. I can make some of it, some of it can be really dark, some of it can be medium tones. So I'm going to do mainly just a dark and a medium. And some of it I will just work on with, oops, what happened here? Sorry, my email popped up. So this is, yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and put some tone in here. And so some of it I get started to say was I do just create a nice darker color, but often it does help to have this kind of like a roadmap. So this is to some extent, I'm using some of our techniques at this stage, but when it comes to the painting, we'll talk about it more. It's important to, you know, remember where you put the bushes in relation to each other. These definitely are, you know, this one is closer. My swap. And these are just going to have a little feathered edge. Let's see here. Some shadows. And even though this, in the photo, this little guy is kind of nondescript, I am going to exaggerate it to bring the foreground forward. And then there will be a little bit of, tufts here and there, very minor tufts of grass, clumps. Right. So again, they're small, they're low. I don't want to make them too obvious, but it does bring us closer. It does give a sense of, okay, this is a foreground, even though we know there's probably more of them in the background here. Okay, so this is plant. This is more of the tufa. Okay, so now I'll work a little bit more on this skyline. Important to make this nice and strong, this horizontal here, so that you know that that's where the water ends and the mountains begin. Yeah, and I'll keep them pretty simple, but I'll give them one extra mountain range in the back. And then I'm not going to actually use pencil on the clouds. The blue will be enough to let me know what's going on. Okay, so here's my palette. I use 8 colors. On the bottom, there's ultramarine blue and a cyan that I use with yellow to make these grassy greens. And then another yellow that I keep as clean as possible for when I want to paint something yellow. And then this is a yellow that I use with mixed with magenta to make my oranges. So this is I only use this yellow with magenta. I not only use this yellow with cyan. You can see there are traces of cyan in this one and traces of magenta in this one, but this is cleaner. And then up above, it's hard to see probably in the video, but there is a purling green, and I use that as a starting point for most of my greens. This is a gold, and it warms up. I mix it with the purling and get some really nice olives. And then often I'll mix some of this green and pull it up and add it to this area up here. Then this is, as I was saying, this is the gold, and this is umber. And these areas up on top, I'm not so worried about what colors I'm mixing up here. Down below, I want these to be pristine and jewel-like. So I never take colors from above here and start mixing them down here. I only bring these colors and add them 2 colors up above. So there's more about that on my website under kits. There's a video, a tutorial. And then this is a shadow violet. It's just a really nice beginning point for grays. I like to leave a lot of paint on the palette because I can go back and use it. I use it as a starting point for mixing the color I want. But more and more, I also like to just leave like half of it there, clean up half of it, so that I can start mixing new colors if I need to. So that's how I work with my palette. And of course, the color is really important in creating depth. So I'm going to start with the blue sky, actually. And the reason being, if I want to get the blue sky the correct color, so that it's not too dark and not too light, because it kind of informs how the rest of the colors need to go. So if I make this too blue, everything else has to be darker. If I make it too light, then the rest of it needs to be lighter. So, so I'm going to start with a cyan, and add it to my palette. Then I'll clean my brush. Well, first of all, test the color and see how close it is, excuse me, to the color of the sky in the photo. So, and the bottom part of the sky near the horizon is about that color, but the top is darker and seems to be more ultramarine. So what I'm going to do is mix some cyan and then mix a little ultramarine blue and mix those together for the top part. And then I'm going to just quickly lay that darker color down and then go back and float in some of the cyan. And as I go down, more water comes through my brush, so it kind of creates a nice sky, graded sky. So the next thing that I want to do is create the mountains, and mainly because I have blue already on my brush. And it's really tricky when you look at those mountains. You go, are they lavender? Are they blue? Are they green? You know, it's like our brain is telling us a number of things. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to go with a shadow violet. We'll start with a shadow violet, which has a little magenta in it. And then I'm going to add just a touch. Well, I'm going to test it first. And, you know, that's okay for some of it. So I'm going to pop that in, and I can go ahead and a little later when it dries, I'll add a little more different color to it. Leave this little piece here, white, because it's in the foreground. Then I'm going to work on the water down below. So I'll come back to this. I'm pretty much done with the sky. I don't want to touch it anymore. So I'll work a little on the water now. So the water is, I'm going to mix purling green on my palette, and then add a little cyan to it that I picked up from down below, and mix those two together. Now it's peeling up on me because I just cleaned it, so I can't really see what's on there. So that's definitely why I have to test. I'll bring a little bit more cyan up there. I overdid that. So let me test it. Not too bad. I'm going to add a little more of that to the cyan I already have there. And I think that might get close enough. So I'm going to put that right along that far edge. And then wick off some of the color on my sleeve, and then stumble forward, leaving some white areas. So my brush is very dry with just a little bit of pigment on it. But it allows me to go make a gradated background. Okay. So that gives you the sense of, you know, it's going dark. One of the things we know about water, it's going to be darker in the distance because we're not looking down at it, and we're probably not seeing as much reflection. So that it isn't on our chart here. That is something to know about water. Okay, so let's go straight to these bushes and talk about what happens with them. So this one here is very pale and fairly kind of bluish. And it's also a little further in the distance. So I'm going to take a little bit of my purling. It needs just a touch of yellow, I believe. So I'm going to pull some yellow from my mixing yellow up here. And see if that warms it up just a little bit. I think that's going to be fine. So I'm going to put that color in. It needs more yellow. So I can see when I really put it down, it needed more yellow. So I'm going to add some yellow to that. It's a little dark now, but we'll see if we can fix that later by creating some contrast between this one and that one. So now I'm going to go down and get some of my green from below, add it to what I had up above here, and test it. And I may need to adjust it, but for now, I'm going to add that to these two. So it's bluer, but it's darker. I'm actually going to add some gold to that to warm it up a bit. Then I look around for other areas where I can add that pretty much that same color. And I see this bush here, which doesn't have any detail in it. It's going back into the background. And a little bit here. And then I'm going to add some purling green, kind of dull this just a little bit. So we got our brighter colors, more intense in the foreground. And I'm going to make this one even more intense. So I'm going to start with just a plain yellow, and then add some of my other greens to it. Need more. So bigger strokes, more detail. And then I'm going to add just a few of these sort of grassy scents of grass here. It's nice to have a little bit of pencil work. It's hard to add pencil work while it's wet, so I'm just going to have to let it be the way it is. Now I'm going to make a shadow for these here, these on this side. It appears to me to be kind of a dull green. I'm going to pop that in there. And then I look around for anywhere else where that color might be helpful. And I see some here. This back here is very pale. It's lighter than the water. So I'm just going to give that a little, just a little bit of color on the sides. And then the rock is very white. It's kind of tricky with the white areas, but we'll work on that. Okay, so right now I want to do a little wash of color in the foreground. So that's pretty bright, which is good. It brings it, we know that this is in the foreground. And then now I think it's time to work on these mountains. Actually, I'm going to get a little bit more of that color for them over here as well. I'm going to work on the color for the tufa, and I'm going to start with shadow violet and then add some magenta to it. Needs a little bit more of that shadow violet. So I'm going to go ahead. It's a little sweet, but I'm going to go ahead and work with that for now. Being careful to leave some white edges. And you can see how now I can just go right over dark areas that I've worked on with graphite, and I don't really even need to change the color. Without a bush here. I do want to get a little bit of tone here. Often that color can be a combination of just a little bit of umber, but just a tiny bit of it. Okay, now I'm going to go back into this mountain in the background. And I'm seeing something like I've got this umber and well, the shadow violet and the magenta up here. Add a little blue to it, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and test it. And I think I need even a little bit more blue. Test again. Well, I think over the gray, this might be fine. There's a hint of green back there. So let's see if I can put that in without, with it being kind of subdued, and I add a little umber to this light green. Let's see what we got here. And a darker green behind here. Excuse me, darker blue. Okay, so essentially the painting is filled in. But what I want to do now is really add more contrast. And that I feel that of all of these techniques, the most important is the contrast. And so I'm happy with the contrast back here. but I can add more contrast to the tufa for sure. It's kind of flat right now. So I want to make it darker, not all over though, but I can add some more of that mixture of shadow violet and magenta with a little umber in it. And really pop in some nice darks. And more than anything, as I just mentioned, I think this is what makes a painting really have depth. Especially in the foreground. And so this is nice because it's kind of making this, river of color that comes across the page. Let some more up here. Okay. So our greens are a little out of whack, and so I'm gonna just keep a good eye on this on the photo and try and mix some colors that are a little bit more accurate. But these are a little darker and greener. These get more yellow here. This one over here is kind of blue. So notice that I do always test my colors. That's the way to make your painting really, really more accurate. And the grass has got more gold in it than I did on the first time around. So I'm going to add some gold to my green. Make it a nice olive. And give that some more texture. Now that's kind of changed this sky, so I'm going to add more real brushwork to it. Didn't test. So shading along the bottom of plants is really important. It anchors them. And because these have such strong shadows there, I'm feeling like these guys need them too, even though I'm not seeing them in the photo. But they need to be anchored, as does that rock and back. I'm not too happy with the how golden that color got, so I'm going to add a little of this magenta mix to it. And it still can go a little darker, the Tufas. And so I'm going to do one more pass of shadow violet, just plain shadow violet. So I'm pausing here to just look at this. To see which of my techniques is working. We have detail more in the front. Size, these are larger, these are smaller. We don't have much overlapping. Color temperature warmer in the front. Definitely just a whole warm feeling to the front. Even though these have some warmth in them, they're accurate, I think. We get some depth in the water. If there was a lot of more turbulence, what you see is little white dots in the back close together, and then as it got closer into the shore, there would be bigger spots of white, kind of what's happening here. So I think these guys, as I look at it, need just a little bit more grounding. Can do a little bit of detail in the tufa that are closer, just a little tiny bit, brings it really close. If I'm going to add any back here, it would be just the tiniest bit right on the edge between the dark and the light. But we want to make sure that this one has more. So all these little details at the end really make all the difference. So it's good to look over your, your handout and think of what have you, what are you missing? What could you be missing? And you certainly can add that. I'm feeling like this plan in front is just kind of dead, you know, and so I want to add some detail to it and spread it out a little bit. So sometimes you need to, I need to create a little bit out of my imagination. You start working not just with the photo, not just with the live um, um, subject, but you start relating to the painting itself. So I think we have a little time for some questions. I'm happy to answer them. I feel pretty happy with this painting, but I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristin. We do have two questions actually, so I'll just ask them in the order in which I received them. So it might be going back a little bit. One participant said that she was confused about the blue that you used in the background or distance. And she saw that one of your images was almost violet black, and then it was brighter green, and then it was warm. So she was just kind of wondering what else you add to your blue to get all of those different types of blues.
I'm wondering if that is in the hills in the background.
It may have been.
Yeah. So I started out with kind of a gray, just a plain gray. And then as I was working with these colors here, I felt like, okay, some of that is back there, but with a little more blue in it. So I took some of this and I added blue to it to make it bluer. And so then I added that there. And then at one point I tried to add, I think I was going to add a little green, and I think that's what this is back here. I left it the way it is. It almost gives me a feeling like it's getting the same kind of light that's here. So I'm kind of decided I just leave it that way. It was one of those happy accidents. So I hope that answers the question. Go ahead and put it more in the chat if you'd like to.
Sure. And then another question we had was, what is the size and type of book that you're using for painting on right now?
Okay, this is called a handbook. Let's see, I'm going to pull this forward. It doesn't always say display and demo, but it has a nice cloth cover. The size is approximately 5.5 by 8.5. It fits in just a second here, I'll get the rest of my kit and so you can see. It fits in this pouch along with the palette and the four tools that I use. So this is all that I use in the field. And although I'm tempted by all the beautiful colors I see out there, I like to keep it simple because it keeps me keeps me color mixing rather than trying to hunt and find the right color. Ultimately, those colors you won't find the right color. So you have to modify it anyway. So I like to work with just a few colors and yeah, so that was the full question. So it's called a handbook. I get it at Dick Blick. And it comes in many different shapes, sizes, either landscape, which is what this is, or portrait. It has almost 200 pages in it. It's not watercolor. It's kind of a bond that takes water as well as pencil. It has a really nice little pouch in the back, so you can, collect things and put them back there. It has a ribbon to mark your place, and then it has a an elastic to close it. So that's that. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have two more questions here. One person asks, so how would you finish the clouds in this painting?
How would I finish them?
Mhm.
I wouldn't. I could. Let me look back at my photo. Yeah, I mean, I can do a little bit on them. So under the shadow underneath the clouds appears to be kind of a blue-gray. So my shadow violet is a little too red. I'm going to add some ultramarine to it. What that looks like. Very little is what I would do. Very, very little. Very, very little with just a pale color. Maybe a little here. But very, very abstract. I wouldn't necessarily try to replicate totally these clouds, but yeah, that's what I do.
Great. And then I know you answered this question earlier in the session, but this person may have joined after you answered this question. They asked again, why do you use the blue pencil rather than graphite? It's a popular question.
I need it. It's a crutch for me, and it's something that Jack Laws teaches. It allows me to look at an object, and instead of going straight to drawing, it allows me to kind of use my pencil and kind of figure out the object and the shape lightly with a blue pencil. And then I get to know it that way. And if I was doing a leaf, for instance, I might do the leaf. If I was using a pencil, I might notice I might not see as much as I would having spent the time to do it in blue first. And then maybe I see, oh my gosh, it has a serrated edge and it has these little mossy, so while I'm just working loosely with the blue pencil, it's teaching me how to draw it. I guess that's the best way I can put it. And it also allows you to move things around. If I had started this drawing, I didn't have enough room for the grass in front, I can just reposition it with my blue pencil. And then what happens is you don't even see it. I didn't erase it. You just don't even see it once the painting is complete.
Great, thank you. I guess actually two more questions have come in. So the first one is, besides the blue pencil, graphite pencil, and a water brush, are there any other tools that you use?
Yeah, the only other tool I use is a gel pen, a white gel pen. And where I would use that is I've just totally made something too dark. I may try to, I'll use it down here. I may try to lighten the whole area with the gel pen. You can use it that way. But mostly I'll use it in water. So I'll test it down here. But if I want to add more of these little dots back here, I might do that. Very subtly, it's just a very subtle use. If I've gotten too dark here, I might go in here and add a little gel pen. The reason not to do it is that it looks like gel pen. It looks like a different tool. But boy, it can be really handy with water. It can show the direction of water. Yeah, it can be really helpful. So that's the fourth tool.
Great. And then last question, people love learning more about your tools. What graphite pencil did you use?
This is a very, very cheap Office Depot pencil, comes in a pack of 20, probably, maybe 10 or so. Anyway, it's basically a 0.7. And I like it because you can write with it nicely. This is Nevada Humanities, so you can see it's nice and clear. But it also, it shades really nicely. So, and then you can go deep with it without snapping the end. So it's a 0.7, so it's fairly big, very large graphite. And then it's a kind of a middle range in terms of softness and HB, I think.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kristin. I'm going to turn my video back on.
Okay, and I'll come back to, let's see.
Great. So thank you again so much, everyone, for coming to our workshop today. We had a really great variety of questions. I really appreciate all the questions that were asked. So just as a reminder, we would love to see photos of what you created today during today's workshop. So you can always email them to us. Either at my email, which is kkuo@nevadahumanities.org, or you can send them to info@nevadahumanities.org. You can also find us on social media and tag us. We do have another workshop coming up with Kristin this Sunday at 10 a.m. So if you're not already signed up for that one, you're welcome to join, of course. People asked about the recording. This will be up on our website later, but we'll also include the link in a post-workshop survey email. So be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, I hope to see all of you at future events in our series. And Kristin, is always such a joy to work with you. So thank you again.
I have one thing to tell the group, that Saturday or Sunday, I'll be working on a different painting. So if you want to take that as well, you're welcome to.
Great.
All right. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everyone.